are back again on your favorite show, Ambassador of Change. I am your host, Pearl Kupe. And this is the show that really strives to really provoke you, to encourage you to make a difference, to be a change, become the change. You know, somebody once said, don't just talk about change, but be the change. And this is the show that inspires you to do exactly that. And today we have another exciting show, and we've got none other than Ndate Sammy Ralekholela on board with us. So let me first start by welcoming you to our show today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Mama.
Well, it's good to have you back this time as a guest, because last time we had you here, you were accompanying your dad,
Yes.
Evangelist Ralekholela,
Yes.
who is one of the fathers, elders in the land,
Yes.
and you're accompanying him. But today you're coming in your own right, and we're going to have a lovely conversation on a number of things. But first of all, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our viewers out there. Tell them a little bit about who you are, your journey, and your walk of faith in a quick summary.
This is Pastor Sammy Ralekholela, the son of Evangelist Dr. T. Ralekholela. I've been saved since age 14. As a child, you know, I grew up in a church, but there was a point in my life where I had to make a personal decision to receive Jesus. And that was at age 14. I've been in ministry for more than 20 years now, first as a worshiper. I started as a keyboardist in my father's crusades, traveling around the country and around the world, and then recorded a couple of albums, and then went into preaching ministry. So currently I'm an associate pastor at my father's church, Gospel Fire Family Church. So it's been an exciting journey to where I am today.
Thank you for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about growing up as a pastor's child.
Yeah.
And you know, oftentimes, and we're so grateful that you got saved and you know, you received Christ for yourself, which is very, very important, because you can't walk in somebody else's salvation.
Right.
You have to receive it for yourself. But quite often times you find that there's this theory or this belief that pastors' children end up not right somehow. It's like they somehow miss the lane in that. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are your views on that?
I think for me, more than anything, when it comes to me, it's been grace more than anything, because we grew up under, as a pastor's child, you grew up under that cloud of people expectation of you. If you're a pastor's child, you're supposed to do 1, 2, 3. You know, they put you at a certain moral standard. Or you're not supposed to do. So it puts a lot of pressure on a lot of kids that, hey, I need to grow up by myself. I need to figure my way out. I need to be my own person. And then most of the kids then will tend to rebel against people's expectations. For me, it was a case of, look, I personally have a calling upon my life. I think I was blessed to know and receive a calling upon my life at a very young age. Remember growing up in school, I started singing in school when I was age 5, and then in my father's church. So the calling upon my life has always been there. And I can say for me, it is what has guided me. So a lot of times you find pastors' kids, it takes time, I think it's grace, for them to figure themselves out, to figure out what is it that God has called me to do, not just being a pastor's child. And for me, it helped me in that sense of knowing the calling of God upon my life. And of course, having parents also, it matters, because there will be times when parents, maybe they don't guide the children because they're so caught up in ministry, in church. So a lot of kids, they feel neglected, you know, because the church takes up all the time of the parents. You know, when they wake up in the morning, growing up, for an example, we used to have what you call the mission house. You know, way back in the 80s, whereby a mission house is it's a house within a church campus. So that means there was no privacy, because people think, it's part of church, so people can rock up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So there's no privacy, there's no time with the children. And ministry at that time also, there was a lot of struggle within the ministry financially and so forth. So when children look look at that, see the struggle of the parents. Financially, there are certain things that we want to have, we're not able to have. And secondly, the way sometimes the church, the congregation abuses the time of the parents and a whole lot of things. So children grow up resenting church. They grow up resenting the work of God because this church is taking time away from our parents. This church, we see it abusing our parents, you know. We see our parents sacrificing so much time without getting anything in return. So most of the kids then, they develop bitterness towards the work of God. I could have gone that route, but because, like I said, I had a personal call upon my life, and when I saw what was happening, I don't know, God somehow just shielded me from that. I could see, I mean, our folks, especially my father, they traveled a lot because growing up, it was evangelistic ministry. They would go for 3 weeks at some point, you know, come back home for a week and then they're tired and then they go. So those dynamics, but what has helped me personally was being involved in ministry. I think I would say that's one thing that has helped me. Being involved in the ministry, I started traveling at a very young age. So I got to spend time with them, you know, I got to see their ministry. I got to, you know, firsthand experience the high and lows of ministry. I got to have conversations with them, you know, in terms of what's happening now. How are you handling this? How are you dealing with? So growing up, for me, being involved in the work of God, it's something that has helped me and shielded me from a potential bitterness that I could have had growing up.
Very, very important. I think you mentioned a number of important things. One, that the congregation needs to be sensitive to the family and, you know, not kind of intrude on the privacy. So there's an expectation also on the side of the congregation. Also on the side of parents and ministers is not to forget family time, spending family time. And I think also the third lesson that you mentioned is including your own children in ministry so that that can be combined family and ministry time, and you get to spend time with your parents. Let me ask you the next question that I also want to ask you. Your father, as somebody who's well known and well traveled, not only in South Africa, but out there, how did you deal with finding your own calling and not being swallowed up in his own calling, becoming a mini-me version, a mini-me photocopy version of evangelist? How were you able to identify that, look, this is my own calling, and step out of your father's shadow?
Like I said, for me, I was graced to discover my gifting. For example, I grew up as a worshiper, a musician. So even growing up, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a worshiper, I wanted to be a gospel artist, I wanted to produce music, and I did that at some point. But the biggest thing for me when I was trying to figure out the calling of my life, God says something, which is actually something I realized a couple of years later, that at some point, initially, God had called me to serve. The biggest thing for me was to serve. Even though I was trying to figure my life out, figure out my place in this world, but while I was trying to figure it out, I went into serving 100%, saying, you know what, God, you have placed this ministry upon my father. Let me serve for now. Let me serve the ministry. Let me serve him as the man of God, and believing that, God, as I continue to serve, then God will begin to reveal what my place is in this world. So I was in serving. God was preparing me for my place in the world, whereby now I can't say my calling is definitely separate from my father, but I can definitely say part of my calling is to serve him and to serve the ministry. And I've seen by so doing, then God begins to open up my own space. God begins to send me to certain places that are not, you know, within the ministries. God, I mean, I've been traveling the world, starting with him, and then later stage, then God opens doors for me. So, which is very important, I think, even for people, you know, who have a call upon their lives. The biggest thing that you can do while God is still guiding you, serve in the ministry, serve in whatever space that God has placed you in. You serve, and it is through that serving that God will begin to reveal your place in the world, that God will begin to reveal what he has called you specifically to do. And there is a possibility that your calling is to serve a certain space. Your calling is to serve. It's not everybody who's supposed to be, you know, at the top. Yes, we're called to lead, but maybe part of your leading is by serving. It's by serving. And we undermine that no, everybody needs to be number one. Everybody needs to be on the stage. Everybody, when you call by God, it means you are in the forefront, you're in the stage. You can be called by God, but in the background. You can be called by God to serve another man of God. It's possible. So for me, that is what has helped me growing up, that while I'm trying to figure my space out, my place in the world, while I'm trying to figure out the calling upon my life, I continued serving. And it was through that serving, and of course being mentored by my father. He has played a huge role in my life, because he did not want me to be mini him. Like he was against, because he was happy that I'm a musician. And when I started preaching, I don't preach like him. Sometimes the voice is the same, because I get surprised. Somebody say, oh, I thought it was your father preaching, because your voice, your tone is like him. But the kind of ministry that God has given me is different from, so we complement each other. That's why I'm serving in the church as a pastor, but there's no, like you say, competition or trying to compete with him. Both of us, he's got his place, he's got his ministry, the way he ministers. And when I come on, God has placed a specific ministry upon my life. So that has helped me quite
How would you say your ministry differs from your father? I mean, we all know your father as an evangelist, as revivalist, etc. What would you say are the major maybe differences in terms of your calling?
For me, God has called me for soul healing, for spiritual healing. My ministry is to the hearts, to the wounded, to the, the hurting. So most of my ministry, even that's why with a couple of books that I've written, it is based on that, what people are going through and how to help them navigate through the painful things that happen through their lives. So my ministry, I would say, sum it up in, it's a healing ministry, but more emotional, spiritual, and soul healing. That type of thing. So even when I minister to people preaching, my messages are always about healing, the pain and all those type of things.
That's great. We're going to get to your book later, but I still want to just dig out there, because I also feel that there are pastors, children out there, who are struggling, and I really would want to get some nuggets out of that. Would you say that your ministry is widely received, or would you say also that you sometimes come up against hostility? Do you find people who are hostile, who think, like favoritism, or you're only there because of who your dad is? Have you ever encountered anything like that?
I have not experienced it in terms of people confronting me and saying that, but I've heard of such perceptions. That, oh, you only, doing this because your father. You're only a pastor in your father's church because you are his son, so this is a family thing. So I've had those. But in terms of the actual ministry, it has been well received. In terms of when I minister, I don't want to lie. There's everywhere I go, even within the church where I am, very much received, because I think because of the type of ministry. It is the ministry that is needed, so people cannot oppose. They cannot oppose that type of ministry, because they need it. So of course I know there are those perceptions out there, but I try not to entertain them a lot, because at the end of the day, people always have their opinions. I always say, for example, I only started getting involved in my father's church, I think the past 5 or 6 years or something. And people thought, oh, he just came up now and then he just, be elevated to being a pastor. And I said, there is a good 20 years behind that. Before I can get on that pulpit, there's 20 years of serving in the tents, 20 years of sleeping in the caravans, there's 20 years of ministering in villages. There's about 20 years of that. So when you see me today, when I step up to this place, you must not think,
nepotism.
No, I've been through the journey, I've experienced things. I've paid the price, also because being a minister, there's a price attached to it. I've paid my price. I've had my losses. I've had times when I wanted to give up. I had times when I questioned, am I in this thing simply because it's what I'm exposed to? Am I a pastor because that's all I've been exposed to? So I had to, have those questions in my life. Why am I doing this? Why am I in ministry? If I was born by a teacher, would I still be a minister? So I had to ask those questions and interrogate myself, that am I in this simply because that's all I know? But then deep down in my heart, I knew that the calling has always been there. And there's nothing wrong with being born in a certain place, and that could be how God wanted you to be birthed. That could be where the place where God wanted you to be born so that you can fulfill the purpose. So there's also nothing wrong with the fact that you were born in this environment, in this place. It is a preparation. That's what the environment that was needed for you to become what God has called you to be in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say maybe are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in ministry, and how did you overcome them?
I think number one, like I said, trying to find my place, because especially with me, my father is such a big figure. It's like he's huge. So every time,
trying to fill his shoes.
Trying to fill his shoes.
And you can't, and you had to find your own shoes.
I had to find my own shoes. and that people, there's a thing of this, that people are watching you.
Yeah.
So everything
and
that
watching
you do.
watching to see if you'll make a mistake.
Exactly.
And your mistakes are going to be amplified.
Yeah, they're going to be huge. Yeah. So one had to be cautious, in terms of the things that you do, the things that you expose yourself to. There are certain things that I would want to do, but because I'm trying to protect the calling, I wouldn't do certain things. I wouldn't hang around certain types of people. I had to live quite a very solitude life. I had to live a very lonely life, Like even now, when somebody can ask, who's your friend? I can't mention. I have people I know.
Yeah, my dad. My dad's my friend.
I have people I know, but I wouldn't necessarily call this a big. But but I do have people that are close to me. But all I'm saying is that I had to live a life where, where I hear God. I don't hear the voices, because I know that if I was going to be around a lot of people, there were going to be voices, and some of those voices they were going to affect me somehow. So I tried to live a very secluded life, and I'm very much. Every time you find me, I'm with my family. So those are my friends. My kids are my friends. My wife is my friend. So those are the people that I pour out to, that I feel comfortable around, that I can be myself around them. And that because also of the way I grew up. There are certain cycles that one is trying to break. So because I grew up in a space where the parents were very much involved in the ministry and people were all over them. So I try to kind of break that kind of cycle whereby I consciously, make time for my kids. My kids are very comfortable around me. Yeah. They don't see a monster when I come through. They're very comfortable. My daughter, she's daddy's girl. We can talk about. So I've tried to create that environment within the house. That's, hey, when daddy's home, he's daddy. Yeah. When he goes out to ministry, that's ministry. But when he comes back, you've got my full attention.
And the aspect of privacy, which you mentioned, is very important.
Yes.
Is keeping the home, safe and secure and private.
Yeah, I try not to expose my family in social media and all those type of things, because I try to protect them, because I know also it's spiritual, when they're out there, the enemy is always coming after you. So if you're always exposing your children and exposing the private things of your life, you're giving the enemy to a space or a place to attack. So I try to keep my family very private and so forth. So it's one of the lessons I've learned in life.
That's great. So let's get to the other aspects. So you're an author as well.
Yeah.
And tell us about the books. How many books have you written?
I've got 2 books. I wrote my first book 3 years ago, Purpose Behind Pain. It was dealing with the life of Joseph, what he went through, the pain that he experienced, the rejection, betrayal and all that. But all of that, it's based on, in all things, God works for the good of them that are called according to his purpose. So everything that he went through, it was for a certain purpose. So I'm giving meaning to pain. So that's the first book that I did. Now,
and that's very important, because one of the things I found, I don't know if it's also with you, is that I find that a lot of believers who get born again and saved, it's like they think they're going to live a life of ice cream and chips.
Yes.
Exactly. and they don't, especially in the church, sometimes we're not taught about trials and tribulations. We're not taught about persecution. Or even if we're taught, we don't accept it. And we think that, no, hulukile is going to be nice. So it's very important for people to understand that there will be pain, but that God will convert it. Actually, that pain for our good.
For our good.
To build us.
100%. So that was the book. And then the latest book which I wrote is Courage to Let Go. That one, it challenges the perception or the belief that says holding on is equals to strength. but then when you let go, it means you have failed.
Yeah.
That's why people then are holding on to things that are killing them.
Yeah.
They're holding on to relationships that are toxic, that are abusive, because you mosadi wa mamella or
Yeah.
tshwanetse o mamelle, even
Yeah.
though you're holding on to something that is literally killing you.
That's,
you know?
I want us to pause there because I think that's a very important message, especially for South Africa. South Africa is the nation which is in the top 5 nations of the highest rates of gender-based violence and rape and violence against women. And I think that's a very important message for women who are holding on to relationships which sometimes literally kill them.
Literally.
Literally,
yes,
not just killing them spiritually, but they're women who have died because they've held on to relationships which were literally killing them. So I think this would be a very powerful book for some women to actually read. I remember some years ago, I think it was in 2020, our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, actually pronounced in the nation a state of emergency on the issue of gender-based violence. And one of the comments he made, he said, a lot of women are being abused and staying in relationships for financial reasons because they have nowhere else to go. So acknowledging that we have to let go of some relationships. It's better to be alive. Let me talk to women out there. It is better for you to be alive than to stay in a relationship that is literally killing you for the sake of money. So I think again, this book is very important for us to understand that.
So that's why it requires courage. A lot of things that you have to let go are not easy to let go. Most of the things that you need to let go in order to go into the next level of your life are the hardest thing to let go. You know, when you talk about relationship, it's very hard to let go of certain relationships, because some of those relationships, they are not necessarily bad, but they are bad for where you're going. You know, so that's why it becomes difficult now. There's nothing wrong with this relationship now, but it's okay for here, but for where God wants you to take. You know, you took Abraham and Lot. For where God was taking Abraham, he needed to separate from, and he loved Lot. I mean,
and look what happened to Lot at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It was good for him to separate. So
he
may have become salt.
Exactly. So, and I'm sure it felt bad for Abraham to let go of Lot. I'm sure it didn't feel nice, but that was what was required for the next level. So this book talks about a whole lot of those things, you know, some toxic behaviors. There are things that are self-sabotaging, things that you do. You find yourself, you're stuck in life and you ask, is the devil or it's people? No, sometimes it's you. There's certain habits, certain things that you need to get rid of. That you have to let go of. There's some behaviors that you have to, you have to interrogate.
I want to talk briefly on that because the issues also, as you're talking, I started to think of the issue of soul ties. And, you know, we don't understand the depth of soul ties. And especially in relationships where you get involved, and we know that even church people, they get involved in sexual relationships. Where those sexual relationships, now, what is a soul tie? It binds you to a person. And now you can't release yourself because you are in a romantic relationship or first boyfriend, or because now you're in a physical relationship and now you can't get yourself out of that relationship.
So now here at the end.
So now you've got children.
So now you're
and you're still dying. And now it's not just you dying, it's the children dying as well. Let's also talk a little bit in the last couple of minutes we have. Time always flies here. Just the next 1 minute. Culture, the role of culture and how it can also play a role in not allowing you to be removed from a relationship. I'm just thinking of some of the things they tell you, like when they counsel you, you know, and some of the counsel that is not biblically based, but is culturally based and can actually traditionally stop you maybe from exiting a relationship that is very sour.
No, definitely. That's why the biggest thing is to interrogate, like you say. You have to question things that you're holding on to. You have to question beliefs. You know, there's certain things, you know, culturally, so like Munahale or Musadi Wetsachena, those things, you know, I think at first there was a good intention around it, but the very same thing now has become the cause of a lot of problems. Because as time progresses, people grow. You know, people, but change and people grow. and the world is moving, the world is growing. There are obviously those foundational things, principles that, you know, will never be affected by time and growth. It's just the principle of life. But culturally, within that context, they were working. You know, there are certain beliefs that could work at that time.
Yeah.
Now, because things have changed, you know, women are more independent and all that, certain things within relationship and within the relationship, and they can't step out of that because who is to know musadi tshwantsa so monna tshwantsa so those type of things are culturally also, you have to interrogate them and
And ultimately, our culture, if we're children of God and sons of God, the culture that must drive us primarily is the culture of the kingdom.
100%, yes.
And any culture, whether it's African or otherwise, to the degree that it opposes or contradicts the culture of the kingdom, it must bow down. Sammy, our time has run out so quickly, but yes, we're going to talk about, I'm going to encourage people to buy the book, but I want you in the next 30 seconds to encourage a pastor's child out there who is bitter, who has backslidden, who has left perhaps the ministry because he had a bad experience growing out there. Leave them with a word of encouragement out there.
For every child of a pastor, the biggest thing, that's why when I started was I had to make a personal decision to receive Jesus. Because at some point in life, I always say when I speak to people, when you stand before God one day and God asks you to give account of your life, you can't say, hey, God, I couldn't do this because of so and so. You can't even say, God, I couldn't do this. I couldn't fulfill your call because I saw people doing this to my parents, or I couldn't because my parents did it. You are going to have to give account because when you came into this world, you came alone, and there's a calling upon your life. When God says to me, before you were born, I appointed you, not I appointed people around you. So you have to find your personal relationship with God. You need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, God, I know people have done this. I know my parents, maybe they failed here and there, but this is between me and you. What do you want me to do? What is my calling? And that should be something that is a serious prayer about your life. It's all about personal relationship with God. And that is what will help you even to be able to move away from all the bitterness in your life.
Amen. Well, you heard it from Sammy. Be encouraged out there. Don't let go. And I encourage you to buy this book, look for this book, Courage to Let Go of That Toxic Relationship That May Stop Your Destiny, stop you from fulfilling your kingdom mandate. That's all we had time for. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to interact with us on our social media platforms. Make sure that you look for us on Facebook page, Pearl Kupe, Kingdom Transformer Pearl Kupe, Dr. Pearl Kupe on all other platforms, and also look for our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, you subscribe. You will find some of the older episodes